Okay, so to get started with our DIY sock gnome, we're just going to use a basic sock. So this is one I got at a Menards for, I think, 4 socks for $2, so 50 cents a sock. So just any sock really will do. You can use a long one like this and get a couple gnomes out of them. Or you can just do an ankle cut sock and that would work just as well. So to start, you're going to cut off a section of the sock, probably about 8 to 10 inches. And that even might be a little long, but just cut off about that much of the sock. And you're going to start by putting some rice into the bottom of the sock. So just open it up, dump in 1/2 cup to 1/4 cup, just to give the gnome weight, and that will help it to stay nice and stand upright, I guess. So let's do a little more here. I guess I'll just do the whole 1/2 cup. So 1/2 cup of rice in the bottom of your sock. Then take Polyfil and just fill in your gnome. And as you make these gnomes, you'll start to kind of get an idea of what size you like them. My gnomes usually end up being about 15 inches when they're standing up with their hat. So just get a nice plump filling in your sock, and then you're going to take your rubber band. I end up using a lot of hair ties because I have 3 girls and we have lots of hair ties in our house, so I just will twist off the top. And you can make these gnomes completely without sewing, or you can use sewing for the hat, and I will show you how to do that. I used to take a needle and thread and close it up that way, but it's really not necessary. So now I usually just take a rubber band or a hair twist and just tie it off like that. Take your scissors and cut off any of the excess of the sock. And now you already have your gnome body. So the next step is to make the hat. So we're going to put this off to the side. And for the gnome hats, you can also be pretty creative and choose any type of hat you want. I have some minky fabric left over from a baby blanket that I made, so I'm actually going to use that. There is a pattern down below in the comments for you to use, and that's what I have here. I've used this one for many, many gnomes, so it's a little ragged, but it still works just fine. I like to line up one of the edges, straight edges, with the fabric just to save as much fabric as possible. And then just cut out your fabric or your pattern. You can pin it in place if that works better for you. I'm just going to do it fairly quickly here. There, and then you have the base of your hat. So the next step is to close up your hat. So you're just going to fold over right sides together, and now you can start to see the shape of the gnome hat. I didn't cut it perfectly, so it's off a little bit there. I could trim it, but I might just wait until after I've sewn it. So now you can take the hat over to your sewing machine and just run a seam along the straight side here of the hat. If you do not know how to sew yet, you can also hot glue that in place. And I'm gonna try that today because normally I sew mine in place. It just really gives it a nice sturdy finish to the hat. But today I'm gonna try to hot glue it, just for those of you who don't sew, just to give you an idea that you can do it too. I like to find ways that make things easier. So this is one of the ways I'm hoping will make this project easier for you if you don't sew. So just take the hot glue gun and run it along the straight side here. My hot glue gun is still warming up. But if you do choose to sew, I have a couple hats here that you can see. I'll turn it inside out here. You can just see I just ran a seam along the straight edge, and then it gives you a really nice look to your hat. So that's how you can quickly sew the hat. But let's see if the hot glue gun is ready now, and we will finish hot gluing it. And of course with hot glue, the reason I prefer sewing is because I tend to be a little clumsy with the hot glue, but you just want to make sure you don't get that on your fingers. And you can use any kind of fabric. Felt also is very easy to use with hot glue and the gnome hat. But once you have it, well, hot glue gets everywhere, doesn't it? But once you have it in place, and it's glued down, and be very careful you don't touch the glue. You can also use the silicone gloves. That will prevent your hands from getting on the hot glue, which is a nice feature. And I am just gonna cut off this extra part of the hat here that I had. And when the glue is dry, then just turn the hat inside out. And you can use a pencil or a wooden skewer or something to poke out the top. I have a wooden skewer that we're going to use to fill this hat with, so I'm going to use that just to poke out, to get that pointy edge on your hat. And then with the hot glue, it's not always perfect, so if you want to go back and touch up any spots where the hot glue didn't stick very well, you can do that too. That's probably why I do prefer the sewing, but if you don't know how to sew, then this is a easy alternative. Now that we've filled our sock and cut out and glued our hat together, or sewn it, whichever way you prefer. The sewing is a little bit neater, but you can probably be a little more careful with the hot glue than I was and get a nice, really nice hat still. I'm gonna go with the hot glue hat for this tutorial. But now that you have filled your gnome and done your hat, now it's time to put your gnome together. And this is really all there is to making a DIY sock gnome. So the first thing I like to do is attach the beard. So I do have a little pattern like I mentioned down in the comments, so you can print off your beard. I just kind of put it up on the sock, and you may actually want to adjust the size a little bit. Like this one, maybe I could have added a little bit more fur around the bottom. So just use the pattern or make your own and cut out the beard, and then you're going to hot glue that on to the gnome. And I try to do a little bit below the edge of the faux fur just so that the glue doesn't come out onto the gnome. I don't like when it's visible on the sock. So put your hot glue on and then just stick on your beard. And usually, even if this isn't done perfectly or what you would think is perfectly, it still turns out cute, because when the gnome is resting on the table or shelf, it kind of hides some of the imperfections, so it doesn't have to be a perfect shaped beard. And then the next thing I like to do is put on the hat. So to fill the hat, I'm going to use Polyfil, and then I'm actually going to use a wooden skewer to help the hat stand upright. And you can use a wooden skewer or a wooden dowel like this, a wooden skewer like a kebab skewer, or you can even use, I like using wire, and that works as well. But if you're brand new to making gnomes, I would just stick with a wooden dowel or a wooden skewer, because it's going to be a nice solid shape, or it'll help you keep the shape in your gnome's hat really nicely. So I'm going to cut this one down a little bit, so it's just about half this size. And if you have like a kebab skewer, that works too, and it's a little easier to cut, but I'm going to use this for this gnome. And just take your polyfill and fill in your hat. Let's see, what did I do with the rest of my polyfill? So just fill that in as much as you like. I always adjust it a little bit after I fill it initially. And you can keep like an inch or two on the bottom open, because that will be like your sock guy. So once you put it on there, see how it's kind of too full, that it's not going down onto the sock. So I'm going to take out some of the polyfill and try again. And just try to fit the sock, or I'm sorry, the hat, so that it touches the edge of the beard, and that will give you a really cute look. So once you're satisfied with the position of your hat, like mine right now is a little off-centered, so I'm going to adjust it a little bit more. So that's going to be the right amount of polyfill. And this guy, his hat is standing upright with just the polyfill, so I wouldn't even necessarily need the little dowel, but the dowel does give it a little bit extra strength. So I'm just gonna add it, and you can just stick it through the center of your, where you tied off your sock. And the skewers kind of do poke through easier than this dowel is doing, but it still works okay. And then again, just pull your hat down until you have a nice look. I like how that looks, so I'm satisfied with it. So now I'm gonna hot glue it in place. So I take my hot glue gun and just glue all the way around it. And I kind of tuck the fabric underneath like a hat would be, so you don't see the unfinished edge of the fabric. It gets kind of messy with the fur a little bit, but it's part of the fun, I guess. Just remember to be careful with the hot glue gun. They are so dangerous. The silicone gloves, again, are a good option if you don't want to burn yourself. Okay, so our hat is in place. I need another hot glue gun. So the funnest part of making the gnomes is adding the gnome nose, and it just makes it look like a gnome, right? So I kind of like to pull away a little bit of the fur, just push it down and try to kind of fill it around the nose. You want to line the nose up with the edge of the hat. Sorry, came up kind of funny. So mine's pretty good there. You're gonna put a glob of glue onto the center where you want your nose, and then you're just gonna hold his nose in place. There. And that is pretty much all there is to making a DIY sock gnome. Now there's a million different things you can add to it, or variations of the gnome, but this is just a very basic sock gnome. And then if you look below, I also am going to have a video on how to make the girl gnome. So as you can see, like with the girl gnome, I did add a lot more embellishments. I added a little outfit on her and a little thing on her hat. And that part of that is because the girl gnomes, they don't have the beard to kind of fill in. So they're a little bit plain with just the braids. But if you are interested in how to make a girl gnome, then you can also find that video below. But this is just a quick tutorial on how you can make a DIY sock gnome with sewing or without. And again, the pattern is below. If you would like that, you can just sign up and you will get that directly to your inbox. But let me know what you think. I know there's a lot of gnome lover makers out there, so I would love to hear from you too. Any cool things you're learning, or any additions or things you would do differently. So anyways, thanks for watching, and I hope that you'll follow along below with the subscribe button and that we can continue crafting together.